I do have a hot topic, but I don't know if we want to save it for the real thing.
Okay, what is it? If it's related, we should save it.
Okay, I'll save it. I'll tease it. I'll tease it just so you know it's coming.
Okay.
The Laravel versus React versus Rails drama.
I'm drama, whatever. I've been watching all of Aaron Francis's videos on this stuff, and I
I need to go
swear
back
I'm
and
gonna
look at
start.
stuff.
Like I'm gonna start. Like it's
Stuff is so
so good.
yeah. There's well, we'll come back to it. We'll come back to it.
Yeah.
Put a pin in it.
Okay.
Let's see. Something okay, so this is like more small talk, nothing controversial. So React Conf was in Henderson, Vegas. No, sorry, Henderson, Nevada. Have you been to Henderson? Oh goodness, did you freeze? Did I freeze? This is awesome. Okay, so if you're in the chat, tell me who's frozen, me or Brad. We'll see. This is fun. So I'll just keep talking in case I'm not the one that's frozen. Okay, Brad disappeared. So the React Conf was in Henderson, Nevada, and it was kind of fascinating because I was in Vegas a couple of weeks ago. Oh, there we are. Sweet.
Perfect time for internet to just drop
Well, I was like, "Is that me or you?"
the
I'm just gonna
connection.
keep talking in case it's me.
Yeah.
Or you. So I was just saying that the React Conf was in Henderson, Nevada, and so it was really interesting since I was in Vegas 2-ish months ago. When I went to Vegas, it was cold. It was like in the
Mm.
50s and 60s, and so then I land in Vegas this time, and it's like dragon's breath, just like 90s, 100. And we went out to Henderson, and Henderson is like the complete opposite of what I think of when I think of Vegas.
Really?
It is at least where we were at. So we were at the Westin, which is a resort, and it was like golf club, spa, resort, no casinos in the lobby,
Oh.
like no smoking, very, very clean. There's palm trees, green grass everywhere, a giant lake. It was just very different than like I said, what I think of when I think of it, Vegas and the strip and everything.
Did you have a chance to go to like Vegas proper and have some fun there, or was it just in and out for the conference?
Yeah, so I just went in and out for the conference. So I got to the location and was pretty much on site the entire time. So they did
Mhm.
a good
Mhm.
job of feeding us, especially since people didn't leave at night.
Yeah,
And then the
okay.
last night that we were there, they didn't have dinner. My team went out into Henderson, which was kind of different. It just felt more like a normal American town. And we got pizza and then just went back to the hotel and hung out at their bar. Um, but I think a bunch of people did go to like over to the strip. What would that have been? Thursday night. And then my team, I had to fly out early Friday morning, but my team also went off-roading.
Sweet.
So apparently there's like a bunch of trails outside of Vegas that are like actual trails that you can go off-roading on. So anyways, yeah. But
Man, okay, like, speaking about the weather,
yeah.
I decided to keep running after the half marathon
Good for
training, and so,
you.
like, once a week, I'll do, like, 5 miles just to, like,
Yeah.
keep up with it. I was dying today, like, Texas had hit, like, 90 pretty much,
Oh
and,
my
it is
goodness.
so much harder in that weather.
Oh my goodness. So I don't know if you think about it this way, but when I was like really into running, this was pre-children. So BC before children. They the kind of metric that I would use is whatever the temperature outside plus 20 degrees is what your body is going to be. So you say 90 and
Yep,
I'm like, oh man, 110. That's
yep,
miserable.
and it's like I come in, I take, like, a freezing cold shower, and I'm still sweating when I get
Yeah,
out,
that's
like, it's
awful.
so hard to cool off.
That's awful. Yeah, but good for you for keeping it up. Like, that's the most like, to me, that's the, most disappointing thing is, like, when you stop and you lose it and you're like, "Oh, man, I can barely do it." So,
Yeah, yeah, I'm definitely not, like, as quick as I was running, but I'm
yeah,
just like, "Look, if I'm moving for, like, 45 minutes, that's good."
yeah. I miss it a lot, just the clarity that I get when I'm running. My big thing right now is my knees. I probably need to go to PT and get them to work on it. But the hard part about your knees is if your knees are bothering you, it's usually your ankle or your hip, most
Yep.
likely your hips. So I'm sure that's what that is.
Yeah, everything was stretching and recovery and
Mhm.
mobility and, also making sure your shoes are right, essentially. Like,
Oh, yep, yep.
it all starts from the bottom up, you know?
Uh-huh. So I did get new shoes before I did a half a year ago, 2 years ago, and I did get shoes, but they were not the right shoes. Like, it didn't affect me when I was doing smaller mileage, but then the day of the half, I just ruined my toes. I've never
Oh.
like, this is so gross. So I'm just gonna say it quickly and then we can move on. I had to have a toenail removed. It was so bad.
Oh,
So
jeez.
keep moving.
That's crazy, that's crazy. Yeah, for me, it was just, like, random pains here and there in and around the ankles or where it just took time to recover, essentially. But, yeah, I don't know, running. I like lifting better at the end of the day.
Yeah. Jason's in the chat. Appreciate the vomit emojis. It was disgusting. Uh, so, what injury are we talking about? For me, it was probably childbirth. So,
I tore an Achilles, that was my worst.
uh, yep. Let's see. Do you want to dive in or do you want to? Because we do have some good stuff.
Yeah, I'm really interested to hear about your trip to React Conf and then just, like, talk about all the announcements. Now whose internet is it? Is it yours or mine? Yeah, I feel like I'm still on right now. Oh, Jason tore his Achilles too. How did you do it? I actually did it at a bachelor party playing, like, just catch with a football in a cul-de-sac. I was, like, running
What is
routes and tore it. Okay, did you get it?
what is
You're back.
happening? I don't know if that's StreamYard or what. Okay, let's do the fancy intro and let's hope that everything cooperates.
Wait.
Let's see where.
You're there? Okay. How was your internet today?
This is gonna be brutal.
I know.
Okay, hold on. Let me do a few things on my end. This is gonna be fun. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm just, like, shutting down everything I don't need right now.
Yeah, me too. Um, and I am also running this right now in let's see, in Arc, which I love,
Ah.
but sometimes it can be a resource hog. So I'm also trying to pull it up in Chrome.
Oh, I just saw a feature of Arc that I didn't know existed.
What?
Coworker of mine, like, just split a window, like, split 2 websites in the same window. Oh, see. Internet's crazy today. There, we're back.
This is gonna be so fun.
I know.
Uh, if it does get
Oh, you're in twice now.
there we go.
Okay.
So wow. I was gonna say if this is bad, we might just have to postpone because it's gonna be miserable
Sure, sure.
if I'm just cutting in and out the whole time. I've shut everything down.
Yeah,
So
first it was me. I was on VPN, so I got off that.
well, and I almost wondered if it's uh StreamYard and you can't see me, can you?
I cannot see you right now.
That's very weird. Oh my goodness. Let's see. Sorry, everybody. I wonder if I switch cameras. There we go. Not quite as good, but at least we have something. Something is better than nothing. Okay. Actually, this is kind of interesting. So I upgraded my computer a while back, and as soon as I did that, it wouldn't recognize my Nikon camera.
Weird.
Uh,
What'd you go to and from?
well, I was going. Oh, this was like when I upgraded to the latest version of the Mac OS,
Gotcha.
and I have a Nikon, and so they have a Nikon camera utility that lets you just like USB-C and directly to your computer, so you don't have to have like a capture card. And I did a little bit of research, and it was like, oh, you need to remove, like in the command line, some of their stuff that they do with the new camera stuff in
Yikes.
the latest version. So it's like disable these features. So as soon as I did that, it resolved itself.
It seems like for me, every time I update my Stream Deck or my Wave XLR, like Elgato products,
Uh-huh.
something stops working that always used to
It's
work.
weird.
Like for instance, I could tap on top of my Wave XLR to mute and unmute my mic, but now that doesn't work anymore.
Uh,
And I used to be able to push in the dial on my Stream Deck Plus or whatever to mute and unmute my mic, and that doesn't work anymore. And so now the
uh,
only way I can do it is use the touch screen to tap
lame,
or like a button, and I'm like, this is so dumb. Like I update it, now it doesn't work. Give me a break.
lame. Okay. I'm going to do our fancy intro, and hopefully the internet will cooperate.
Fingers crossed.
I just need to put the intro. Okay, awesome. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Compressed FM, a podcast all about web design and development with a little bit of zest. In today's episode, we're going to be talking all about React 19 and the React Conf announcements.
Web development and design, who would have guessed? Well, we can do them both, even add a little zest. So turn up the volume, get ready for the best. Let's get it started in this episode of Compress.
Hello, my name is Amy Dutton, and I am a lead maintainer on the Redwood JS core team.
Hey y'all, my name is Brad Garapi, and I'm a front-end developer at Atlassian working on Confluence.
Awesome. So let's talk about React 19 and React Conf.
Yeah, so
Oh,
you got
but
sponsored?
first, yes, let's talk about our sponsor. So today's episode is sponsored by Sanity. Sanity has been a longtime supporter of the podcast. We've actually been running the Compressed FM website on Sanity since it launched over 3 years ago.
Wow.
So it is everything behind it. And some of the coolest features that they have is that you have different webhooks. So we have automations working so that it will automatically generate cover images and social images. And those will generate on Cloudinary and then actually just update automatically on Sanity. The other cool thing is the original Compressed FM website was running on Next.js, and then we recently switched over to Remix. And because everything was in Sanity, it made that transition super smooth because all those queries were already written, all the information was already in Sanity. We just had to update a few things on the front end. So they've created some really cool features recently where you can go to a page and then almost update that page on the front end, and it will show you, like, it'll update those changes in the back end. So go check out sanity.io. We've had a fantastic experience with them. Their team is fantastic. We know several people there. So check it out. Thanks, Sanity, for being a Compressed FM sponsor.
So React Conf, you actually got to go in person. I had
Yeah.
huge FOMO of not being there. So many big things were announced, so many awesome people on stage, so many people attending. So I guess first and foremost, like, tell me about your experience at React
Yeah.
Conf.
Yeah, it was super fun. So I think for me, a huge part of that was being able to interact with people that I had met online and that I've interacted with online. So we've had Sam on the podcast. He has a podcast called Front End First. He was there. I ate dinner next to him at the speakers dinner. I also ran into Knut, so we were talking about Sanity. He is DevRel there, so ran into him. Kent C. Dodds has been on the show a couple times. He was there. I mean, just the list goes on. Met Theo. Michael Chan's been on the podcast. He was there. So it's just funny when you start seeing all these people that you feel like you talk to and you kind of know, and then you meet them in person. So
Yeah.
we had a great time. It's been kind of funny coming back though, because there were a lot of conversations that we had there in person, and those conversations continued online after we left. And when you're there in person, you get body language, you get tone, inflection, things like that. And so some of those things have turned into a little bit harder debates now that it's online. But then you also have people that are jumping into the conversations that weren't there at the conference, that have no additional
Yeah.
context. And so you've seen a few hot, spicy takes come out too, which has kind of been fun.
Yeah. And now, if I understand right, React Conf, this is like the official Meta React conference,
That
whereas the other one that uh, recently happened. Now I'm blanking.
is it React
React
Summit? Because I've
Summit,
done that one.
yeah,
Okay. I've done that
is
one too.
not like official. It's not from Meta.
That's right. Yeah, so Meta or Facebook put on this particular conference. I thought that it was the first official React conference that they've ever done, but while we were there, they were talking about doing one in 2019 before
Yeah.
COVID. So this is the first one that they've done post-COVID. And when somebody said that, I was like, "Oh yeah, I do remember seeing like an amphitheater where they were outside with this conference." So I don't know if they renamed it for this to be the first official React Conf, but at the very least, it was the first since COVID.
Yeah, and it's actually crazy when you think about it. I was watching this stuff, the live streams. I was like, "Man, there is an entire conference not dedicated to, like, web development or anything like that, but to a specific library." It's kinda wild to think how big it got, you know?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, and just how many frameworks are built on top of it,
Yeah,
and the ecosystem that supports it that needs to know what are the things.
yeah. Um, I'm really curious. I could never imagine meeting, like, Theo in person. I see him as
Yeah.
such, like, a Twitch personality, a YouTube personality, and he seems, like, so big, you know? He's
Yeah.
tall, though, right? Theo's pretty tall?
Tall, he is tall. What I think is funny, I I guess I can say this, is that, I've heard several people that had met him previously. I mean, I didn't talk to him for an extended period of time, but they were just saying that a lot of the vibe that you get online is a persona,
Oh,
that
yeah,
that's
for
not
sure.
necessarily him. And I know that ticks some people off even more because 'cause they're like, "Really? This is the persona that you chose?"
Yeah, yeah,
But I don't think that that's necessarily his heart, and again, like, as I was kinda talking about before, when you're online, a lot of your tone and inflection are assumed. I mean, I know we're talking about video here, but I think that that's maybe one of the reasons why he's been so successful is because he has an opinion, and you have to put something out there for somebody to be able to speak in alignment or against, and so that's part of what drives all of his engagement is like, I have a strong opinion and I'm just going to throw it out there and see how people react.
yeah, he totally comes across as, like, incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly involved, like, he cares a lot,
Yeah.
but at the same time comes in with a strong opinion and reasons to back it up, and I think
Yep.
it's a good thing to have. Also,
Yeah.
like, his setup and the way he delivers is so good now, and the fact that he makes all of his content live is just, like, a really cool way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. He was walking around with a camera doing some short form content.
Cool.
So that was kind of fun to see. But yeah, I'm curious. I need to go back and see exactly what he's put out. I was sitting a couple seats down from him during the keynote, and he was live tweeting the whole thing. So that
Hmm.
was kind of funny. I didn't realize that's what he was doing at the time.
He was
And then
just very
afterwards,
disinterested.
well, he just kept, like, taking pictures of
Right.
slides, and then I'd see him, like, type whatever, and I checked Twitter later, and I was like, "Oh, that's what you were doing."
Yeah.
I saw that.
Uh,
But
Obviously, there's tons of React core team there. Did you get to meet any of those
mhm.
folks?
Yep, I met Eli, who I'm not sure, I think he might lead the team.
Mm,
So it's kind of interesting. There's, the Meta React team, and then there's the Vercel React team. So they were both
yes.
there. Sebastian and Andrew are both on the Vercel side, and then I think everybody else is Meta.
Gotcha.
So I got to meet both of them, and then one of the guys, I'm trying to remember his name, he delivered part of the keynote. I sat next to him near the at the speakers dinner, and we were kinda talking about some of the features that he announced and demoed. But yeah,
Ye
it's cool to be, talking to people that actually make this stuff.
Yeah. Do you have any understanding of that split, like why some folks work at Vercel and some folks work at Meta? So at the end of the
Yes.
day, React is an open source library, right? It became a foundation, if I understand correctly, too. And so I guess that means anybody from anywhere can work on it. But it seems like
Yeah.
there's two very specific camps of folks that do.
Yeah, the way that I understand it, and I'm gonna try and be as objective as possible, is that there was kind of a split in what the direction should be. And so one of the core team members that had a very distinct vision for what the future of React needed to look like tried to do it at Meta.
Mm,
And they said, we want to deprioritize this. This is not our focus right now. And so then he went to Vercel and is currently at started trying to implement his vision on Vercel's dime instead of Meta's. And so, anyways, that's kind of how that split happened.
yeah, okay.
But,
Makes sense. I
anyways,
mean I mean, Vercel has the Next.js framework that has the ability to run all this stuff on the server, and so
yep,
that's gonna push this forward a whole lot faster than, maybe trying to do it internally at Facebook.
yep.
Okay, so React Conf, tons of big talks, tons of big announcements. I guess, do we wanna start with React 19 or do we wanna start with the compiler?
Oh, man. Doesn't matter to me. Start to pick, but you pick.
Let's do the compiler because it's
Okay.
shorter and, when I heard about the React compiler, I had this idea in my head that, like, floated through that I was like, "Is this gonna, like, get rid of, like, use state and use effect? Is this gonna compile
Mm,
away reactivity like Svelte?" And then I saw the demo and I was like, "Oh, okay, it's not that."
yeah.
Um, so, like, the long and short of it is, like, okay, the React compiler is just gonna get rid of a lot of these memoization
Mhm.
concerns from your React code. So you don't
Yep.
really need to worry about the use memo hook. It's gonna prevent some re-renders and ultimately improve performance because of that, kind of for free because it can do this static code analysis. So
That's right.
all this optimization work you were doing by hand now gets done by a compiler and it's better at it. So it'll
That's
improve
right.
your performance
That's right.
because it'll
And
catch
the
cases you can't catch.
the component code that they showed was crazy. It was like
Yes.
33% line reduction. I
Yes.
don't remember how many times faster. So it's great that it's like you don't have to do anything. You just have to use the compiler and it does all that for you.
Well, now let's talk about actually using the compiler because
Yeah.
that's where I kind of like had this big sigh, like, dang it, like it's a Babel plugin. For real? Um, Now this doesn't mean you can't use it with things like ES Build and Vite. You can, but because it's a Babel plugin, to me, it probably says if it's running through Babel, you're still kind of putting that stopgap in your, build flow that is going to slow it down. Whereas if it ran as like a plugin in a different environment, I think it could have been faster. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm assuming this is probably going to happen later, but I think this was just the easiest way to get things going.
Yeah, and this goes back to one of those things where, unless I'm missing something, I haven't worried about it too much just because I'm like, I'll let the tools that I use implement and handle that for me and just reap the benefits from using those tools.
The interesting thing though is that, like, okay, I take things from a Remix point of view. Remix gives you control of Vite config. So
Mhm.
if you want to adopt this, I don't think Remix is going to do it for you. I think they're going to say like, well, here, if you want to use the compiler, stick this plugin in there.
Yeah, well,
So
Remix is taking a nap right now, so you're
yeah,
right.
we're
I'm
we're
not gonna
talking
do
about
that
that too.
right now.
But yeah, something like Next.js, sure, they're going to build it in under the hood, and you won't have to think about it at all,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
So it's good.
let's talk about that, Brad. How do you feel about Remix taking a nap?
Okay. It's at first I thought it was weird, right? Because the way that I traditionally thought about React Router, and I haven't been back to React Router in a while, was it's like so I felt like you approached it from a client side point of view. It was very like, you have the routes component, and then inside of there, you had the route components with the URL matching, and then the component that it rendered. And it felt like a very front end first focused way to do routing, which probably shouldn't be the case, right? We've been shown that um, routing has a lot to do with data loading on the server. So like you should probably start there. But now that I was seeing like Ryan Florence's talk with all the demos of like how React Router works now that it's been adopting all these remix features, like the loaders, like the actions, like the route config, which is exactly the same as Remix, it feels exactly the same. Your
Yeah.
route component just exports a loader in action, and it does the same thing. It feels the same. So like at this point, I can totally see whether like the differences between these two packages is almost nothing. It's the Vite
Mhm.
plugin essentially.
Yep.
And so now this is perfect. You think about, okay, what if I want to make a vanilla React app today? You build it with Vite, you have vanilla React, and you put React Router in there. Like that feels almost exactly the same as a Remix app because React Router has all the Remix support.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
okay, I get it. That's great. I think my concern is like, what is Remix now? Everybody loves the branding. Everybody loves the idea behind Remix. What does it become? And they didn't really drop any hints as to what Remix is going to be,
Yeah.
right? If
I heard hints of it. I didn't get any, like, detailed, concrete answers, or if I did, I've just conveniently forgotten.
okay,
But, yeah, so I was kinda like, "What in the world? You just blew up your brand." And, like, my entertainment that evening at the conference was going onto Twitter and reading everybody's,
oh yeah,
like, response to it.
yeah,
But, kinda like you, I spent a significant amount of time talking to Ryan or listening to Ryan on Friday. So we had a booth, Redwood had a booth there, and the Remix booth was right across from us, and so in between sessions, we would just sit and talk, and so he kind of gave a little bit more insight into the logic and their strategic move, and it was like, really React Router, like, well, really Remix is built on top of React Router, and we've
right,
been just moving everything that we build in Remix over to React Router.
right,
And so at that point, it was like, why are we managing 2 different projects that basically do the exact same thing?
right.
And so and people have said, like, "Why did you make it take a nap? Just make everything the same." And I don't think that they understand, like, exactly how difficult that is to even have duplication where you have the exact same project. Like, it's not smart.
It's also about migration. At the end of the
Yes.
day, it's
Yep.
easier to keep React Router installed,
Yep.
upgrade to a V7 version where, they've constantly backported Remix features, and now you're just running what is Remix. It's just under
Yep.
the React Router name. So like
That's right.
that was really smart of them to be like, everybody's building on React Router. Let's just go
Yep.
forward there.
Well, and
Um,
I don't think people realize that either, exactly how many legacy projects are on React Router. And so, for example, one of at the Redwood booth, we had a ton of giveaways. And in order to register for the giveaway, we asked 3 questions. We just wanted to know, like, what front end framework are you using? Are you using RSCs, or, do you plan to? And then we
mhm,
were just curious where people were getting their tech news. But that first question of what are you using, a majority of the people said just React. It was
right,
not Next.js, it was not
right.
Redwood, it was not Remix. And so for those people to use routing, uh, React Router makes complete sense. And so in order to support them and continue to move forward, it makes sense why they would say Remix is going to take a nap. We're going to keep porting everything over. We're going to get React Router where we want it to be. And then Remix, they're like, that brand can just go on and be something so much more. And so I think
Yeah.
they have a good vision for what that's going to be with RSCs and continuing to grow that particular side of things. But what this does is it gives the Remix brand space to be something that it's not right now, and something that
Unique.
is not, yeah, and is not tied to the existing code base.
So, I wanna jump back to the React Router point first, and then I
Yep.
wanna go forward to the Remix point. Jumping back to the React Router point, name another router. Like, I think that's
Oh, I have one
why
in mind.
name another router that
It's
is that is
was it
popular and widely used.
TanStack? The TanStack
TanStack.
router.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
TanStack.
And I did hang out
That's
with Tanner
recent.
too. I did hang out with Tanner too.
That's recent,
Yeah.
but, like, before the frameworks came out,
Oh,
there
yeah.
was no real competitor to React Router.
Well,
Peop
and React Router was part of Create React app. Like, they
Yeah,
basically gave it a giant hug and said, "You're gonna
yeah.
be part of what we ship."
So at the end of the day, like, it is the de facto
Yeah.
router for React, so you have to move it forward. You can't
Yep.
let that project die and be like, "No, no, no, we're gonna take the Remix brand and move it forward."
Yes.
You can't.
Yeah.
You're gonna ask way too many people to do that rewrite instead of just a version bump.
Yep. Well, and you think that there was like, a visceral reaction to people saying, like, Remix is taking a nap. If you'd gone the other way, it would have been
Yeah.
even worse.
Those apps would never have gotten updated,
Mm,
right? Can't do
yeah,
that to the ecosystem.
right.
Okay, but talking about Remix taking a nap, like, I wanna talk about hopes and aspirations for what Remix can be now that it's freed from doing the routing and doing the data loading. Like, I wanna see, and I don't know if this is too far-fetched, but all this talk about Laravel and all this talk about these, like, nice opinionated backend frameworks that can really do things for you.
Mhm.
I don't know if this is way outside the scope of what Remix is and what they're thinking about it as. Like, what if it started having opinions about that kind of stuff? And and really just kind of being able to be a fully featured backend framework.
Yeah,
I think it's a pipe dream. I don't know if, like, Ryan wants to come in that heavy-handed, but at the end of the day, like, I think JavaScript ecosystem needs something like that.
yeah, I'm not sure he would, but I've been wrong before. I and this is kinda where I'm coming at it from. So, when we were having a conversation, he basically was trying to paint a picture of a vertical where you have a line, and above the line is front end, below the line is back end, stuff you can't see. And
Sure.
he was like, Remix barely touches into that back end piece. We do a
Right.
little bit with the use server, use loader hooks, all those things. Um, and then he was like, with Redwood, we go a little bit deeper with that because we ship with the database. And right now you have GraphQL, you have the way to access all that
Yeah.
information. You can create a fully functional API. We have database function, like all these things. And then you can also go up where we have the front end, you have all the router stuff, you have your components, and that's really React, that part
Yeah.
that's on top. But then he was also saying that Redwood also goes wide, and we have attached on all these things that you need for projects. So we have
Like
Storybook.
Storybook and
Yep.
yeah,
And then we also have testing that is included
yeah,
out of the box. And we're very opinionated about those tools and what you're using. So we're going wide as well. And those are like project peripherals you have to add on in order to make a project work.
sure.
So I don't think that they would add on the weight of project pieces
The
the
width,
way that
yeah.
Redwood has. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with that. Like, let people pick their own testing frameworks, and if they want Storybook or not, that a lot of opinions come in there. But I do think what we desperately need is, like, a better handle on data modeling and CRUD operations, like, those kind of basics. Like, Redwood has the generators and stuff, like,
Yep.
we need stuff like that, and, like, maybe baked in auth, right? And baked in, like, even if it's SQLite, like,
Yep.
bake in a database, and I think that can take us far. That gets a
So
whole lot tougher when you talk about where those things run. Is it distributed? Is it serverless, or is it a long running server? It gets tougher. Um, you need all those adapters to come into play, but I think that's what we need is something better on the back end or more fleshed out.
yeah, so Redwood is working on a lot of this stuff. And people are like, we want Laravel or we want Rails and JavaScript.
Yeah,
And there are some people that are saying, no, we're composable. You should be able to do whatever you want. Don't tell me, give me my choices. So it's kind of interesting. I'm curious where people will land on that spectrum. But Redwood is working on a lot of those pieces. And so when you talk about data modeling, at least right now, if you use GraphQL, we provide all that information.
yeah,
But as an option, as an alternative, so I just stuck a link in the chat. This was on my Twitter account. I retweeted Rob Cameron, who's on the core team. And Rob is like a heavy Rails developer. He like loves Rails, and I enjoy kind of making fun of him about it. But what he did recently was because of RSCs and the functionality that we have, like with form actions and a lot of the new features that React came out with, he created kind of like a model thing that you have in Rails. So Rails is what is it? Convention over configuration. And so what
Mhm.
that means is if you name certain things a particular way, then Rails is able to make assumptions based on those naming conventions.
Sure.
Laravel does the same thing, and you can override it. You can say, "No, I know what I'm doing." Like a prime example would be like I was watching Jeffrey Way's video on like 30 days to with Laravel, and he wanted to show a job board. Well, you can't name the table in the database jobs because Laravel does have a jobs queue, and so
Sure.
there's going to be a conflict there. So you can override all that. But with this example demo, what it does is it says, "Hey, I know that." A, a patient is gonna have a doctor, and a patient is gonna have appointments, and they'll have multiple appointments, and so being able to establish those relationships, but because you have a model or like a database view of how those relationships work, then you can have a form, and if you just tell the form, "Hey, it's connected to this particular
Yep.
model," then
Yep.
you don't have to write all the logic in order
Yep.
to create, read, update, and delete. It's smart enough to do all that stuff.
Yep.
So, it's a pretty cool demo if you wanna check it out. Right now, he's just having it output to the console so you can see how that works, and it's using Redwood functions, but I, would love to see this demo or this proof of concept really become a complete feature set within Redwood.
Totally. Yeah. We need more back-end opinions, I think.
Well, so this is also a spicy take. We had a couple people tell us that we should drop Storybook, which like made me like, what? I need my Storybook because I do love it as a front end developer. But it made me wonder, okay, if we did drop Storybook, I would be okay with it if we implement something else instead. And so I've been trying to think like, what does Storybook really do that I like? Or what is it lacking that I really want? So anyways, that might be something that I do a proof of concept over the next few weeks, trying to break that down.
Yeah, I think the question is, what's the use case of Storybook?
Mhm.
Recently, I saw Shashi in his Gridiron Survivors project
Yeah.
put like introductory documentation in Storybook, which I've never seen before.
Mhm.
Um, and I was like, I don't know, I kind of like it as markdown files at the end of the day, but
Yeah.
like the visual nature of it is kind of cool, especially because you can jam some components in there, which is nice.
Sure.
Um, but traditionally, I feel like Storybook is about component design and
Mhm.
modeling the different states of components. I think all the other stuff is fluff on top of what Storybook's actual value proposition is. So it
Yeah.
depends in from Redwood's point of view, like what Storybook's purpose is in the stack.
Yeah. For Well, I saw the same repo because after you commented on it, I was like,
Yes.
"Let me go look at the
Yeah.
storybook here." I prefer that stuff in Notion just because it's easier to author and edit
Yeah.
than in Storybook. I get his point of like, "Well, let's keep everything all in one place." For me, Storybook really has 2 use cases. I use it when I'm trying to build a component in isolation.
Yes.
When I was at Zeal, one of the clients that I was on, I would be charged with, "Okay, you designed a front end feature. We want you to do the front end work and then hand it off to the back end developer to implement in Rails." And so I would create a dummy page in Rails and build out this
Yeah.
component on this dummy page. And then when I would hand in the feature, I would write documentation to say, "When you get ready to implement it, delete this page, delete this code, blah, blah, blah." And it
Yeah.
just felt so dumb that in order to deliver a front end feature, I had to write code that I was like, This should not be in production. Get rid of it."
Yep.
And so to me, Storybook eliminates that because I would have been able to create all of that front end feature code, that component within Storybook and hand that off to the developer. And it would have given them better documentation on what that component does. The other use case that I really enjoy using it for is if I've been off of a project for, say, 6 months and I come back into it and I don't remember how it works. It makes it so easy to jump into Storybook and see, okay, what components were actually created, what's left to do, or how do I use this component? It also prevents like component duplication where I'm like, oh, yeah, I already
Mm.
have a button component that does what I need. Here's all this stuff. I can just copy straight from Storybook and paste it in. So I'm not one of those diehards where I have absolutely every single component within Storybook in all of my projects, but it really does give me a nice launch pad or starting point when I
Yeah.
get ready to work on a project.
Yeah, it's good for giving you the lay of the land
Mhm.
component wise of what's
Yep.
available in project.
Yeah, and I think, probably at least one of the people that said something to us about getting rid of Storybook, their argument was that Playwright does so much right now, just lean more into Playwright. And I think that's more in reference to Storybook's new features. So Playwright still isn't gonna give me, like, a visual interface
Component
where I can go
isolation.
through. Yeah, exactly, but, like, the new Storybook features, you can do unit testing within Storybook. And so it's
Yeah.
like, why not hand that off to Playwright, which is what I do,
Sure.
but I understand, like, if you, if you wanted to be able to see your component right there on the page and then test it right there on the page where you have it implemented in Storybook, I get somebody being like, "Oh, this could be valuable," but I don't
Valuable
think
for
that.
design systems,
Yep.
not for apps.
Well, it's
Like,
like 2 different users, right? You have the
yeah,
design or like a designer or front-end developer that's trying to create the component, and then you also have maybe a back-end person that's doing more end-to-end testing
yeah,
that would wanna write those tests. To me, it makes sense that you would keep that stuff within,
yeah,
um, Playwright or Cypress or whatever you're using.
yeah, agreed. Okay, so I guess the next big topic at the conference
Mhm.
was React 19. React
Yep,
19's in beta. It's got a lot of, I would say, quality of life improvements. Would you
yep.
say that this was like a monumental type release?
Monumental in the sense that they haven't released anything for, like, 2
2
years.
years? Yeah,
It's just crazy. Which, well, I wanna say something that's kind of interesting about the whole JavaScript ecosystem right now. We haven't had a major release in 2 years, so I feel like it's in some ways given us time to settle into the tools and things that we're using. I mean, people joke about a new JavaScript framework coming out every day, which
yeah,
may or may not be true, but the fact that React has been stable for that time
yeah,
allows us to experiment a little bit more with the tooling versus the technology.
yeah,
And so it'll be really interesting to see what happens now that there's a new version. And I would extend this even beyond React to say Svelte just announced their RC for version 5. And so there's a change there, and I can't speak to Vue, but it's kind of interesting that just kind of that rubber band effect that you have things that are stretching and constricting and anyways, it'll just be interesting to see what happens.
yeah. Yeah, in so the change log is, I don't know, it's pretty pretty big, I would say. Like, I would say 5 or 6 things, and I think about half of these are mostly just, like, quality of life improvements that fix React isms, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, just things that were weird about working in React. So I'll probably, well, we'll start with the easy stuff first, and then we'll get to the heavy hitting stuff later, but, like, okay, one of the things there was, simplified usage of context. So previously, when you had to like
Mm.
use a context, there was a provider, and there was like a use context hook that you have to have as well. And that was kind of weird. And so now when you make a context, it is the provider. You can just use it as a component. You don't have to be like context dot provider and do anything fancy. And then they have a new use hook. You don't have to use the use context hook. You can just use the context in a use hook. So like now I used to make a separate hook and a separate, like, 2 files, one for the context and the provider and one for a hook to access that context, just so I could wrap it nice. That all goes away. Now I would, when I author context, it'll just be in one file and it'll export the context. That's it. And I feel like it's great for testing, it's great for understandability of your code. Um, I think it's just the easy win.
Yeah. They also did a big thing around refs. Like, they
I
had a
you know,
big joke about everybody hates refs.
I don't think I ever wrote a forward ref. Did you ever have to write forward refs?
I think I used it with React Hook Forms because they
Ah,
had
okay.
some weird stuff, or maybe even actually Sanity may have been using them before too, if you want to create a custom component to be able to pass on some of the features from like their default component to a custom component.
Gotcha. I didn't realize forward refs existed due to class components.
Mm,
That's what they said in the talk, where like that's why we had to do it. But yeah, sure. Now ref is a prop. You can pass it around. The reference to an element on the page. That's it. Um,
yeah.
so great, easy quality of life improvement that React fixed for itself, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Here's another thing. What about the hydration errors? So
Oh, yeah.
previously, if you um, loaded a page and then it hydrated, you could get errors. What was rendered on the server was not the same as what was rendered on the client, and the errors that you got like made no sense. It was incredibly difficult to figure out the difference between what the server thought was the truth and what the client thought was the
Yeah.
truth. Now they actually show you a diff, like this is what's changed, and you can go address that. So again, just a problem with React that was made better, but this is like a huge one. Like now with
Yeah.
all this server stuff coming to play, this is going to be way more important.
Yeah. It's funny how much those developer experience pieces make such a huge difference.
Yeah, because like if you boot up any app for the first time and you see that, if it's the app that you work on at work or even just like a template or something, you're just going to be like, this is so broken, I don't understand, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
And now it's clear.
Yep.
Um, another I don't know if I would say this is a quality of life improvement or an easy win, but like I thought this was kind of a big deal. The document metadata, so like you can put a title tag or meta tags pretty much anywhere in your React tree, and they will figure out how to lift them up to your head and do it
Yep.
in the right order, both server side and client side, which is kind of cool.
Did you used to use that React Helmet? Used
I
to
did, yeah.
sprinkle that in, yeah.
I did, yeah. And that was like, yeah, that was the OG way to do it, right? Before
Mhm.
Framework stepped in and said, no, we can help you solve this problem.
Yep, that's right.
And I think that's another thing that we're gonna see just moving forward is that all these problems that Remix was solving and that Next are solving, React 19 had a bunch of, like, pre-rendering APIs come out, and, like, that's half of, like, what some of these frameworks do is allow you to or sorry, prefetching,
Mhm.
prefetch things. And so I think a lot of these frameworks API services are going to start decreasing where they can just rely on React more and more and more. And frameworks are just like facilitating the server side piece of things.
Yeah. Well, and that was a conversation that we had where React is slowly extending its reach. And so when you start talking about frameworks, what makes a framework really unique if we're all using React at the core? So, like a prime example would be the form action stuff that they announced.
Yeah.
And it was really funny. I was actually sitting next to Ryan when they made that announcement, and they're like, look at this code. And Ryan was like, looks like Remix.
He's so snarky. It's hysterical.
Yeah, but, anyways, that does make a good point. That is something that Remix handled, and now React is offering it out of the box. It's a slightly different implementation than how Remix was doing it, but now more apps will look like that because React offers that functionality.
It's great though, because what it really does is it just from the client side gives you a really easy entry point to talk to your server, to do something
Yep.
on the server. Um, but Remix came from a router background.
Mhm,
Remix's actions were very pointed at URLs. You
mhm,
data load by URL. You perform actions by URL. Whereas React and I think Next.js did it this way as well, where they're like, hand us a function and we'll run that. Like it's not tied to a URL, so you can kind of share different actions. And that's something that I found working in Remix was a little bit confusing. Like, what if you can from two different pages delete your to do, right? Do you use the same action? Do you point one page's action to the other page's action? It's kind of like
mm,
misdirection, or do you share logic somehow? I kind of like in these React actions now, it's just like this is the logic, the functionality that I want to get done. It doesn't necessarily have to be tied to a URL. I like
mhm,
that.
mhm. Yeah, for sure.
And then there's a bunch of associated hooks too, right? Like just like Remix, you can get the state of the action, you can get the state of the form submit or the transition. You know if it's pending, you know if it's errored out. Even give you helpers for optimistic UI, which is huge. It's another big
Mhm.
problem to solve. And at the end of the day, React's just like, here's some. They do feel like primitives. They really do
Yep,
feel like primitives around this stuff, which just makes it easier to orchestrate at the end of the day.
for sure.
That's that's pretty much it.
So okay, I was holding off because I didn't wanna derail your list. But that does bring up the question and the debate that's continued online since React Conf is, are we moving more towards PHP, Laravel? or Ruby and Rails? Are we trying to go back to the way it was? Who has it better? Who's right?
Yeah. Um, okay, here's like one take I want to put out there why I think this approach is correct. How do I put this? Like, JavaScript is the only language that will run in the browser, right? The only programming language that will run in the browser. It also runs on the server. Because of that, approaching solving this problem with JavaScript, I think, is the right take. Running PHP on the server is great, but at the end of the day, if you can be productive in both cases with the same language, it's always going to win out. I think solving the problem with JavaScript is the right choice. Other than that, I just think it's the same problem being approached in two different ways. Um, we've solved the front end interactivity before communities like Laravel and PHP did, right? And then they're working from the back end to the front, and we're working from the front end to the back. That means we have a lot of work to do on the back end to get there. But I still think doing it in JavaScript is going to be the right choice just because it's like one language to rule them all. Like you're going to produce a whole lot more productive developers by doing it this way. What do you think?
That's a good question. So I read this article. Oh yeah, I found it. I'm going to share it in the chat. And this was written by a guy that is a Laravel developer and talking about kind of his perspective on Laravel versus a JavaScript ecosystem and talking about some of the things that are really nice within Laravel and then some of the things that it's really missing. And I thought it was a really good take because like he starts off and is just like, I'm insanely productive in Laravel. And what's interesting is a lot of the things that he talks about, we do have within Redwood, like when you're talking about generators or just how it's able to quickly spin up files and provide different conventions in order for you to move faster. But the point that he made, and I even heard Ryan talk about this at the conference, is that PHP and Ruby are really missing that front end interactivity piece.
Oh, yeah.
Like it just makes all the difference with your user experience. And, I haven't used this, but the example that I heard thrown out is like the Hey calendar. So Hey is created by Basecamp. You have DHH. Rails actually kind of came out of Basecamp. But he was saying that you can create an event. So you drag it over and then it'll snap back and then do a trip to the server and then come back to where you dragged it. And it's just a terrible user experience because it's like ship as little JavaScript to the browser as possible, which is
Yeah.
nice in thought. But the JavaScript lets you have that optimistic UI. It makes it feel like things are moving faster. And so anyways, I've been experimenting a little bit lately with Laravel just to see what all the fuss is about. And I get that like being able to move fast. It is nice having those conventions when you're talking about this is what my models look like. It has an ORM, which is an object relationship model. So you just say, hey, these things are related. You get a lot of that stuff with Prisma, but this is just kind of on a different level.
Yeah.
And Laravel also has some conventions where they use an MVC setup, which stands for model view controller. So you have your views, which is more like your templating. You have a model, which establishes what your database looks like. And then your controller kind of connects everything and says, hey, you want this, connect this database with this view and stick those things together. So I think opinions are good. People are obsessed like, oh, I don't want to commit or I love that composability. But I think what you are doing is you're compromising speed and just being able to sit down and move quickly with a project. So it'll be interesting to see as JavaScript frameworks continue to level up and kind of raise that floor and kind of meet some of the stuff that Laravel has, but I would say in some ways surpass it because you do have to pull in like Alpine or Livewire or Inertia
Yeah.
in order to be able to use those JavaScript pieces the same way that you do within a React framework.
Yeah, well, like let's talk about that because I don't have any experience with Alpine and I don't have any experience with Inertia using it with React in conjunction with Laravel.
Mhm.
I'm very curious to see how that stacks up.
Yep.
Of course, the alternative there is have a single React front end that hits a Laravel API in the back end. You could do
Yep.
that too, but then all that network code that like Remix and Next help you out with goes away
Yep.
unless you're running two servers. You've got a Remix application and your loaders and actions in your Remix application are then talking to Laravel, but now you've got two different applications and you're adding an extra network hop in there just to do the same things.
Yep.
And then, of course, like co-location, being close to your users, all that kind of stuff comes into play. It works much better when your front end is talking to a back end that's co-located with a database on one service and not
Yep.
multiple. Do you have any experience with like the front end side of Laravel?
Yep. So I haven't used Inertia.
Okay.
Inertia is supposed to be like the glue. That's how they market it, the
Right.
glue between your server and your front end. So I haven't used Inertia to know, okay, can I pull in Inertia and use that with React the same way that I'm used to using React? I have dabbled with Alpine and a little bit of Livewire. I haven't gone down a deep, like a deep dive on
Livewire
it.
kind of seems like that HTMX, like I'm gonna throw a little like attribute on there and that's what connects it all together.
Yeah.
Kind of cool.
The
Like I think that would be the way I would go if I was writing this, but it does still feel a little bit handicapped in comparison to the full power of JavaScript on the front end.
Oh, yeah. Well, and the weird part is when I've been looking at Livewire components, it feels like you're writing PHP and JavaScript,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
feels weird,
Yeah.
and a lot of the PHP world is still very much ingrained in class components, and
Yeah.
so it's been, like, rethinking or, remembering, "Okay, how did all this class stuff work?" Okay, and some of it's like, "This feels nice," but then I've just gotten so used to writing functional code within the JavaScript ecosystem that some of it just feels cumbersome. I it's just, some of that comes down to developer experience. Alpine is fine. There's parts of it that feel clunky. You have to remember when you're working with Alpine, the render order. So if I have a value on the server that I want to send down to my component, you have to do fancy things in order to get the component to update it on the server because otherwise
Mm.
you're just passing everything down. But if you want to send it back up, you've got to do other things. So, it's just different syntaxes and it reminds me too of we've had several entrepreneurs on the show. The guy from NX is the first one that comes to mind that's behind Ingrok. And one of the things that he said was just use boring tools. I think James Perkins said the exact same thing from Unkey. Like use boring tools that you know how to use. And so a lot of times I want to chase the shiniest thing, but it's like what is going to help you move the fastest when you're developing? Use that. Doesn't have to be interesting, doesn't have to be exciting or cutting edge, but use the thing that you're gonna be the most productive in.
Is that an argument for or against Laravel
It's
with
like an
React?
argument for both.
It's
It's an
it's like
argument
whatever
for
you wanna
both.
do.
It's like whatever you know is
Yeah.
kinda what it is.
Yeah.
And so this is where what I mean by that is, like I've wanted to build an app for a while and just be like, I wanna feel what it likes to own a product, to do the whole like customer thing.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
wanna feel what that's like. And so part of it's like, yeah, I could build it in React. I could build it in Remix or Next or Redwood, like or have experience in all of them. I could build it on that. And I have a problem where I'll start to go down and build it a certain way. And I'm like, I wonder what this would look like in this other framework.
Yeah.
And so I won't finish it, but I'll go and like port everything over and I'll be super productive for a while. But then I'll be like, oh, well, I wonder what this is like in Laravel. So then I'll jump over to Laravel and port everything over there. And so what I'm really doing is I'm procrastinating solving the hard problems. And sometimes those harder problems are easier to solve in the framework that I ported over to. And sometimes it's just like avoiding the inevitable. But the thing is like just build on what you know. Like I probably would have been finished if I stayed on the original framework that I started
Yeah.
to build it in.
I think the funny thing that's happening is we used to have decision fatigue on the front end, and now even outside of React frameworks are like aligning on the same methods and patterns to do things.
Mhm.
Everybody pretty much has accepted Tailwind, I feel like,
Yeah.
or you know, no more CSS and JS, right? We've kind of moved away from that. I think, and React hasn't changed a whole lot, so we're not having to make as many decisions on the front end. And now the whole JavaScript community starts walking over to the back end and says, "Hey, what do we use for email? What do we use for auth? What do we use for databases?
Yeah.
Uh, how can we complicate making these decisions now?" And And that's where I feel myself spending most of the time making those decisions. Oh, crap. Now I got to email customers. How do I do that? Do I
Yeah.
use a service? React or Next.js or Remix doesn't have anything built in to do this kind of stuff, or auth, right? Like now all the front end folks are marching into the back end and having to make those decisions.
Yep.
And now I think this is why Laravel is getting pulled into the spotlight here because,
Mhm.
this offers all of that. But then how do
Yep.
we get it to play nice with the front end?
Yep. It does offer all that. Well, and what's funny too, that article that I linked to, it's like you can host as many like JavaScript frameworks or what your projects online for free. I can go get a
Yeah.
free
Yeah.
account at Excel at Netlify, AWS,
Yeah.
whatever. It's awesome. But then as soon as you go over to Laravel, well, I've got to pay for
Yeah.
hosting.
Pay.
I've got to set up DigitalOcean or Linode or, all these other things. But like the other side of that is yes, those serverless systems are fantastic, but the things that it doesn't do, I'm like, well, I've got to go set up email. Well, now I'm paying for email. Now I got to set
Right.
up jobs. So I'm going to go set up an ingest account. Well, now I'm paying for ingest. And so then you end up tacking on all these other services in order to get that same functionality that Laravel
Right.
offers out of the box. So I think at the end of the day, you're still end up paying the same amount, whether it's add-on services or the base package of Laravel or whatever that looks like. But you're just solving different problems and how you want to approach them and what services you want to tack on in order to find the solution.
Yep. And it's precisely all those decisions why I just don't wind up doing this stuff on my own at the end of the day.
Oh, man. Good stuff.
Yeah.
I
This
love it. I love this stuff, though.
Yeah. Yeah. It's what do they say? Like programming is just like video games for adults. There's problems to solve, puzzles to get into, neat shiny treasures you find along the way.
Yeah.
It keeps us
Well,
engaged.
that's the thing that gets me. So coming from a design background, people are like, "Oh, you're so creative." And I'm like, "Programming's so creative too. You have to find a different way to solve a problem.
Oh
It's a
yeah.
different way of thinking about the problem solving it visually versus like with words, but all of it's creative and I love it."
Can I just say I love this dude's website? Uh like like the
Um,
big bold text, the Ted
oh,
Lasso believe at the bottom, and then his he uses view transitions.
yeah, I was gonna say, "Did you see the view transitions?"
So good. So
Yeah,
good.
Josh Larson. So,
Yeah. So I need to read this article and figure out what he thinks.
yeah. I do need to get on the, who is it? Francis? A
Aaron Francis.
Aaron Francis. I started to say Andrew. I need to watch some of Aaron Francis's stuff. I've seen some of the social videos he's posted, and his
Yeah.
quality is just top notch, but
Yeah, well, he's got, Steve Tenuto, doing, like, a lot of the editing
yeah.
and stuff, and yeah, they're a powerhouse team, and he's been putting out really good, like, Laravel and React type content right
Mhm,
now. They do
mhm.
like to ride the wave of, like, what the discourse is on Twitter, but he has really good opinions, and they're very clearly expressed, and that
Yeah,
recent Laravel versus React video is very good, just talking about
I need
solving
to watch it.
solving problems coming from different angles.
Yeah. Um, they're also doing a sponsored course on SQLite that looks
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah, SQLite's also hot right now.
Yeah, for sure. Also, fun fact about Aaron is he has 2 sets of twins, which just
I saw
blows my
Yeah,
mind.
that's insane. That's insane.
Blows my mind. Okay, do you wanna do picks and plugs? Do you have any?
I need to think of what to pick this week.
I can go first.
Go first. Yeah, go first.
So, I'm going to pick a series. Now, here's a disclaimer. I just started reading these books, but, somebody told me they're like, better than Harry Potter, which I'm like, those are strong words there, to say that it's better than Harry Potter, but it is called Keeper of the Lost Cities. So these books are aimed at 9 through 12-year-olds, and like I said, I heard that they're a great series. I tried to get my daughter Adele into it. She loves to read, and I don't know Brad, how your kids are, but my kids are in this phase right now where it's like it needs to be their idea in order for it to be a good idea. So,
Too
like,
young for that, but that's funny.
she was not really interested until I was finally like I found a graphic novel of the first book, and my kids have been more interested in graphic novels lately, and so I was like, "If I get this graphic novel, will you read it?" And she's like, "I suppose." but she got 5 pages in and she's like, "Mom, this is so interesting. I love this book." And so I bought the I don't usually do graphic novels, so I bought the book that actually has words and everything. It's a very thick book. It's like 500 pages. But so far, I'm really enjoying it. And the fact that it's juvenile fiction, I can just fly through it. So I'm really enjoying reading that. So I'll probably crank through the entire series and kind of make it my summer thing. So check that out. It is Keeper of the Lost Cities. And then for my plug, I'm going to pick my newsletter. So I have a newsletter called brokencomb.dev. If you go there, you can register. But the idea with a broken comb, we've talked about it a couple of times on the podcast, is that you can go wide and deep on knowledge. And usually as a junior, you'll kind of go wide trying to figure out what's interesting. And then as you encounter problems or you're required to do certain things for work, you'll start to go deep and develop expertise. And so you kind of get this broken comb look. But this point of the newsletter is really just to try and go wide and deep on tech and the things that we're talking about. So check that out at brokencomb.dev. I try to give you as much time.
I had time, yeah. But I don't know if I picked this before. It's on the list, but I'm not sure if I actually said it. So if I did, I'll switch. Did I pick Minecraft yet?
No, I don't think so. We did talk about it with Becca, but I think that was like as a not online conversation.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna pick Minecraft. So
Awesome.
like my 5-year-old son is old enough to like kind of talk to his friends about video games, and he's played a couple games here and there, but like far and away the most popular game for kids nowadays is Minecraft. And so I decided to buy it for the Nintendo Switch, and I played it like 15 years ago when it first came out, and it was so cool knowing that like one guy made it and all that kind of stuff. And it's just been fun to get back into, fun to play with my son, and he's like his brain must be going through some sort of like creative renaissance or something because he's getting really artistic and really into building with Legos and really into Minecraft. And so he just thinks about what he wants to build, and he can barely like he's like just learning how to do the controls and stuff, but he like made a house yesterday and I was like, dude, that's
That's
so
awesome.
awesome. So we've been playing it together, and it's just been great and so easy to pick up and play on the Switch too, which I love.
Yeah. My kids made a few things, and the way that they can just spin around the worlds, like my brain is not that fast. And I'll be like, hold on, just tell me when you're there. Like I have to look away. Makes me a little
Oh
dizzy.
man.
But yeah, that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, and then I'm gonna plug my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Brad Garapi. I'm still trying to put out videos like once a week is kind of my goal. I've been doing remix content. I recently got a really good question on LinkedIn about basic skills that every front end developer needs to have and what interviewers should kind of be looking for. And I put out my thoughts on that. And so people look out there, youtube.com/Brad Garapi. I'm trying to get monetized this year. Gonna be more remix content coming out as well.
Awesome. Exciting. Well, thanks everybody for joining us online, or if you're listening in your podcatcher of choice, please leave us a rating and review. Allows us to record other episodes as well as help you listeners like you find us. So for now, that's all we got. It's like users like you, listeners like you. Oh man. Well, I'm hungry, so I'm gonna go ahead and call it. Keep the post show really short.
For sure. Is this our 200th today?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I think it's labeled as episode 200 in the counter
Oh,
thing.
well, it's not. We're gonna have a big celebration. 200.
Me too.
We do need
Sweet.
to.
This one was really good. This
Yeah.
one was really good.
All right. Thanks, everybody.